The quill scratches against parchment, a sound so ordinary it shouldn't carry weight. But in the plantation office of the Yanzi estate, that scratch is the sound of a soul being reduced to numbers. Samuel, aged 27, literate. Purchased, March 15, 1852. $1,200. Caroline Yanzi's hand moves with mechanical precision, recording the transaction between columns of cotton yields and equipment repairs. Her penmanship is flawless, each letter formed with the same careful control she applies to every aspect of her existence. The March sunlight streams through French windows, catching dust motes that drift like ash, illuminating the careful lie written across every page of her ledgers. Because these books tell a story of profit margins and asset management, of smart investments and calculated returns. They do not record screams. They do not document the cost of human misery required to generate each neat column of figures. They transform flesh into finance, suffering into solvency. Caroline's green eyes, the same shade as the Alabama River when storm clouds gather, scan the entries with the focus of a woman who has learned that survival requires refusing to see certain truths. She is 27 years old, unmarried in a world that considers this a failure, running a plantation that most men couldn't manage. Every decision she makes must be perfect because imperfection, in a woman, is unforgivable. The crack of a whip splits the humid air. Caroline's hand stills mid-stroke, the quill hovering above the page. A drop of ink falls, spreading like blood across the number $1,200. She does not turn toward the window. Does not acknowledge the sound that carries from the fields where Virgil Henley is maintaining discipline, the plantation term for breaking a person's spirit one lash at a time. This is the unspoken agreement that sustains her world. She keeps the books clean, and Henley keeps the labor productive. She records assets. He ensures those assets perform. The violence that makes her wealth possible remains conveniently distant, a necessary ugliness she can pretend not to notice as long as she doesn't look directly at it. Another crack. Then a sound that might be a man's voice, though it's too raw to contain actual words. Caroline dips her quill again, determined to finish the entry. Samuel, assigned to household management and correspondence. Expected yield, administrative efficiency, reduced workload for primary owner. She writes primary owner because the truth is more complicated. She owns half of Samuel. Her twin sister Catherine owns the other half, a consequence of their father's death and the peculiar inheritance laws that gave them joint control of everything. The land, the cotton, the mansion, the human beings who work it all. Footsteps approach from the hallway, Catherine's distinctive gait, slightly uneven because she refuses to wear the fashionable but crippling shoes their society demands. Caroline doesn't look up, but her jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. Her sister has always been the chaos to Caroline's order, the question to her answer, the doubt that undermines certainty. Still counting our fortune in flesh? Catherine's voice carries that edge Caroline has learned to dread, the tone that suggests their comfortable lies are about to be challenged. I'm recording a business transaction, Caroline replies, her voice flat as the Alabama plains. Someone needs to manage this estate properly. And someone needs to question whether proper management includes purchasing human beings like livestock. The argument is old, worn smooth by repetition. Catherine objects. Caroline defends necessity. Neither changes. Neither can change, really, because changing would require dismantling the entire structure of their existence. So they circle the same territory, speaking words that mean nothing because action is impossible. Outside, Henley's whip falls silent. The afternoon settles into the thick, oppressive heat that characterizes central Alabama in spring, air so heavy it feels like drowning on dry land. Somewhere in that heat, Samuel is learning the rules of his new prison. Learning that intelligence makes you valuable but visibility makes you vulnerable. Learning that surviving requires becoming invisible, except when visibility serves those who own you. Caroline returns to her ledger, adding Samuel to the inventory between a new cotton gin and a breeding mare. The categories blur together because in this world, in these books, everything is property. Everything has a price. Everything can be bought, sold, used up, and replaced. The scratch of the quill resumes, that ordinary sound that carries the weight of extraordinary evil. And Caroline Yancey, who prides herself on facing reality with unflinching pragmatism, continues to record her careful lies, continues to transform horror into accounting, continues to believe that if she never looks directly at the violence, she can remain innocent of it. But innocence, like everything else on the Yancey plantation, is a commodity. And Caroline's supply is running dangerously low. Before we continue, I need to ask you something. If you're listening from anywhere in the Deep South, or from any corner of this country where hidden histories still whisper through the walls of old buildings, leave a comment telling me where you're from. This channel survives because of listeners like you who hunger for the truth that history tried to bury. Hit that subscribe button because what you're about to hear has never been told in full. And stories like this deserve to be remembered. The heat hits Samuel like a physical blow the moment he steps from the relative cool of the main house into the afternoon blaze. The sun hangs white and merciless in a sky bleached of color, turning the Alabama landscape into something biblical, a place of judgment and suffering where the earth itself seems to radiate punishment. He has been at the Yancey plantation for 3 days. 3 days of learning a geography more dangerous than any map could show, the invisible boundaries that divide acceptable from fatal, the unwritten rules that govern every glance, every word, every moment of existence in this carefully ordered hell. The physical layout is simple enough. The main house rises like a temple to cotton wealth, all white columns and expensive windows. Behind it, the quarters sprawl in 2 neat rows, rough cabins that house the 143 people who generate that wealth through labor that begins before dawn and ends long after sunset. Between these 2 worlds sits a careful distance, a space that maintains the fiction that the mansion's elegance has nothing to do with the quarter's misery. But the real geography is far more complex. Samuel is learning to read it in the faces of the other enslaved workers, in their subtle gestures and careful silences. He learns it from old Dinah, who has worked in the Yancey house for longer than Samuel has been alive. She is perhaps 60, though the work makes her seem ancient, back bent from decades of labor, hands gnarled from endless washing and cooking and serving. She speaks rarely, and never when white people can hear. But on Samuel's second morning, as he carries water from the kitchen, she catches his eye. The look lasts perhaps 2 seconds. In it, Samuel reads volumes. Asterisk, you're smart. That makes you dangerous to them and to yourself. Watch everything. Trust nothing. Survive. Asterisk. He learns it from the field hands who return to the quarters each evening, their hands torn from picking cotton, their backs marked by Henley's whip. They regard Samuel with a mixture of envy and suspicion. Envy because housework is easier than field work, suspicion because house workers often become informants, trading others' secrets for slight privileges. He learns it from Isaac, a young man close to Samuel's age who works in the stables. Isaac was born on this plantation, knows no other world, and has developed the kind of cautious friendliness that characterized people who have accepted their cage but still crave human connection within it. The sisters, Isaac tells Samuel quietly on the 3rd evening, as they carry firewood to the main house, they're different from their father. Old Master Cornelius, he was hard but predictable. You knew where you stood. These 2. He trails off, glancing around to ensure no one is listening. Miss Caroline runs everything like a business. Cold. Calculated. Miss Catherine asks questions that could get people killed. Questions. Samuel keeps his voice neutral. about whether things are right or wrong, about whether we're treated fairly. Isaac's expression suggests this kind of thinking is more dangerous than Henley's whip. She doesn't understand that right and wrong don't matter here. Only survival matters. Samuel absorbs this information, adding it to his growing understanding of the Yancey estate's invisible architecture. Miss Caroline is the pragmatist who never questions the system. Miss Catherine is the romantic who questions everything but changes nothing. Both are dangerous in different ways. The texture of the firewood against Samuel's palms is rough, splinters threatening to pierce skin already raw from 3 days of unfamiliar labor. The smell of smoke and cooking meat drifts from the kitchen. Someone is preparing dinner for the main house, food the enslaved workers will never taste. The air itself feels thick with humidity and something else, a tension that Samuel can't quite name but recognizes as the constant, grinding pressure of living under absolute surveillance. Every moment, someone is watching. Henley patrols with his whip and his cold blue eyes that catalog weakness. The house workers report to Caroline, who records everything in her meticulous ledgers. Even the enslaved community polices itself, fear of punishment creating networks of coerced cooperation that make trust impossible. Samuel is learning to navigate this landscape by becoming deliberately unremarkable. He keeps his eyes down, speaks only when spoken to, performs his assigned tasks with competence but not excellence. Too much skill draws attention, and attention draws danger. He is trying to disappear into the background of plantation life, to become just another asset listed in Caroline's ledgers. But on the 4th day, everything changes. Samuel is in the library, a room that smells of leather and tobacco and old paper, a room that represents everything the plantation class aspires to be. He is cataloging books, copying titles into an inventory list, when he hears footsteps approaching. He keeps his eyes on his work, assuming it's Caroline come to check his progress. "Can you actually read those?" The voice is female but not Caroline's. Softer, with a note of genuine curiosity rather than command. Samuel looks up to find Catherine Yancey standing in the doorway. She is identical to her sister in appearance. The same dark auburn hair, the same green eyes, the same height, but everything else about her is different. Where Caroline carries herself with rigid control, Catherine moves with restless energy. Where Caroline's eyes calculate, Catherine's eyes question. And she is holding a book, a French novel with gilt edges and an illustrated cover showing a cathedral and a bell tower. "I can read them, miss." Samuel's response is careful, neutral. Literacy in an enslaved person is valuable, but also dangerous. It suggests independent thought, access to ideas that might challenge the system. Catherine crosses the room, a violation of the unspoken rules that mandate distance between white women and enslaved men. She holds out the book. "What's this one about?" Samuel recognizes the trap immediately. This could be a test, a way to assess his value, or to catch him in some violation that justifies punishment. But something in Catherine's expression, genuine interest rather than malice, makes him answer honestly. "It's about Quasimodo and Esmeralda, miss. About sanctuary and persecution. About the nature of true ugliness versus true beauty." Catherine's eyes widen slightly. Then she does something absolutely forbidden. She sits on the edge of the library table, her elaborate day dress spreading around her like a flower, and says, "Tell me more." And Samuel, in direct violation of every survival instinct he has developed over 27 years of enslavement, begins to talk to her. Not as property to owner, not as inferior to superior, but as one person to another, discussing literature and ideas as if the plantation system doesn't exist, as if they are simply two human beings having a conversation. The afternoon light slants through the library windows, catching dust motes that drift like possibilities. The smell of old books mingles with Catherine's perfume, something floral and expensive. The texture of the novel's cover under Samuel's fingers is smooth leather, worn from repeated reading. And in this moment, in this conversation that should not be happening, something shifts. A boundary is crossed that cannot be uncrossed. A connection is formed that will ultimately destroy everyone it touches. Old Dinah, passing in the hallway, sees them through the open door. Her face goes carefully blank, but her eyes carry a message Samuel has already learned to read. Danger. Terrible danger. Run while you still can. But Samuel doesn't run. He continues talking about cathedral bells and dancing girls, and the question of what makes someone truly monstrous. And Catherine listens with an attention she has never given to the proper young men who court her, to the social obligations her position demands, to anything in her carefully prescribed world. The conversation lasts perhaps 15 minutes. When it ends and Catherine leaves, Samuel stands alone in the library, his heart racing with fear and something he refuses to name. He has just made the mistake that will kill him. He has just become visible. And on a plantation in central Alabama in 1852, visibility for an enslaved man in the presence of a white woman is a death sentence waiting to be carried out. The garden house sits at the edge of the Yancey property, nestled between carefully cultivated roses and the wild tangle where the manicured grounds surrender to Alabama wilderness. It's a small structure, originally built for storing tools and potting plants, but it has fallen into disuse since the plantation hired a dedicated groundskeeper who prefers working from the main shed, which makes it perfect for secrets. Catherine discovers this on a Tuesday afternoon in early April, when she claims she needs Samuel's assistance inventorying the garden supplies. The excuse is transparent enough that any careful observer would see through it immediately. But Caroline is occupied with cotton factors visiting from Montgomery, and Virgil Henley is in the far fields settling a dispute between workers. The window of opportunity is narrow, and Catherine takes it. Samuel follows her to the garden house because he has no choice. When a white woman commands, an enslaved man obeys. This is the fundamental equation of his existence. But as he steps into the dim, plant-scented interior, all dusty windows and forgotten clay pots and the smell of earth and old wood, he understands this has nothing to do with garden supplies. Catherine closes the door behind them. Not locked, but closed. The gesture creates a boundary between inside and outside, between the watching world and this stolen moment. "I've been thinking about what you said," she begins, her fingers tracing the spine of a book she's brought with her. Another French novel, though Samuel suspects she's barely reading them anymore, using them instead as excuses for these increasingly frequent conversations. About Quasimodo finding sanctuary in the cathedral. About how stone walls can protect or imprison, depending on which side you're on. Samuel says nothing. Every instinct screams danger. They are alone together in an enclosed space, a scenario that has gotten countless men who look like him killed. One accusation, one misunderstanding, one moment of Catherine's regret transforming into self-protective lies, and he will hang. But Catherine seems oblivious to the peril, or perhaps she's so desperate for genuine conversation that she's willing to ignore it. She perches on an overturned crate, her elaborate dress incongruous against the garden house's rough interior, and looks at him with eyes that hold something he's learned to fear more than hatred: hope. "Do you ever feel imprisoned?" she asks. "Not just physically, but in your soul? Like the walls everyone else sees as protection are actually cages?" The question is so absurd, so disconnected from reality, that Samuel almost laughs. Does he feel imprisoned? He is enslaved. He is literal property, listed in Caroline's ledgers between farming equipment and livestock. His entire existence is imprisonment. But he recognizes what Catherine is actually asking. She wants to believe their situations are equivalent, that her gilded cage of social expectations and limited options as a plantation woman somehow resembles his existence as human chattel. She wants him to validate her feelings of constraint, to make her suffering feel legitimate by comparison to his. It's a grotesque request, really. But Samuel has learned that survival sometimes requires telling white people what they need to hear. "Yes, miss," he says quietly. "I understand feeling trapped by circumstances you didn't choose." Catherine's face lights up with something that looks disturbingly like joy. "I knew you would understand. Everyone else, my sister, the church ladies, the men who come courting, they all think I should be grateful for what I have. They can't see that wealth and status don't mean anything if you're still not free to choose your own path." She continues talking, words spilling out with the urgency of someone who has been silent too long. She speaks about feeling suffocated by expectations, about wanting to travel beyond Alabama, about reading philosophy that questions the structures of society, about sensing that the world she's been born into is fundamentally wrong in ways she can't quite articulate. And Samuel listens, because listening is part of his performance, but also because something unexpected happens as Catherine talks. Beneath the oblivious privilege, beneath the inability to recognize how incomparable their situations truly are, he glimpses something genuine, a person struggling against constraints she doesn't have the vocabulary to properly name. The afternoon light filters through the dusty windows, turning the garden house golden. The air smells like clay and old leaves and Catherine's perfume, lavender and something else, something expensive he can't identify. Outside, a mockingbird runs through its repertoire of stolen songs. "Tell me about freedom," Catherine says suddenly. "Not the abstract concept, but what it actually means to you. What would you do if you were truly free?" The question is a blade disguised as curiosity. Because honest answers are dangerous, but lies create their own perils. Samuel chooses his words with the care of someone navigating a minefield. "I would choose my own work, miss. Decide where to live. Maybe learn a trade, carpentry or printing. Simple things that most people take for granted." "Would you leave Alabama?" "Probably, miss. This place holds too many painful memories." Catherine nods as if this confirms something she's been thinking. Then she does something that stops Samuel's breath. She reaches out and touches his hand. Just briefly, just her fingertips against his knuckles, but the gesture shatters every boundary that keeps their world functioning. "I'm sorry," she whispers. "For all of it. For what my family has done. For what this system does. I'm sorry you're trapped here." Samuel pulls his hand back, his heart hammering. "Miss Catherine, you can't. We can't. This is dangerous." "I know." Her eyes hold his, and in them he sees something that terrifies him more than Henley's whip. Genuine affection. "But I'm tired of pretending I don't see you as human. I'm tired of all the lies we're supposed to accept." They stand in the golden light of the garden house, two people separated by an abyss that Catherine wants to believe can be bridged with good intentions, and Samuel knows cannot be crossed without destroying them both. This moment, this dangerous, impossible moment, is the beginning of everything that will burn. Outside, unnoticed by either of them, Caroline Yancey pauses on her walk back from the main house. She sees the closed door of the garden house. Sees her sister's horse still tied at the nearby post, though Catherine claimed she would be riding this afternoon. Sees Samuel's absence from his usual afternoon duties. Caroline's calculating mind begins adding numbers that produce a sum she doesn't want to acknowledge. Her hand tightens on her parasol, knuckles going white. Then she continues walking, her face composed, her mind already working through the implications of what her sister might be doing in that garden house with property Caroline helped purchase. The mockingbird continues its thieving songs. The Alabama sun beats down merciless and knowing. And in the garden house, Catherine and Samuel remain in their dangerous conversation, unaware that the walls they thought protected them have already been breached. Caroline Yancey has always prided herself on reading situations accurately, on seeing patterns others miss, on understanding the subtle currents that drive human behavior. It's what makes her exceptional at managing the plantation's complex operations, at negotiating with cotton factors, at maintaining control in a world designed to deny women power. So when Samuel begins disappearing for extended periods, when his accounting work shows small errors that suggest distraction, when she notices her sister's improved mood coinciding with Samuel's absences, Caroline sees the pattern immediately. And she does what Caroline always does when threatened: she asserts control. It begins subtly. On a Thursday evening, as the sun starts its descent toward the Alabama River, Caroline calls Samuel to her office. "I need these shipping manifests copied before morning," she says, gesturing to a stack of documents that would take any reasonable person 3 hours to complete. "Sit there." She indicates the desk positioned directly across from hers. "I'll be working late as well. We can keep each other company." The command is phrased as consideration, but Samuel recognizes it for what it is: surveillance disguised as work assignment. He sits where directed and begins copying the manifests in his careful hand, aware of Caroline's eyes on him, assessing, calculating. The evening deepens. The house staff completes their duties and retreats to the quarters. The plantation settles into that peculiar quiet of spring nights. Crickets singing their urgent songs, the distant sound of the river, the creak of the old house adjusting to temperature changes. And Caroline keeps Samuel working. She manufactures reasons to extend the task, questions about his handwriting, requests to verify numbers, sudden realizations of additional documents that need copying. By the time she finally dismisses him, it's past midnight, and Samuel can barely keep his eyes open. This pattern repeats the next night, and the next, and the next. Caroline creates an exhausting schedule that keeps Samuel at her side during every evening hour he might otherwise spend elsewhere. She asks him to read aloud from correspondence while she reviews accounts, claiming his voice helps her concentrate. She requests his opinion on various business matters, drawing him into conversations that feel almost intimate in their focus and duration. Samuel understands what's happening. He is being claimed, possessed, kept away from Catherine through the simple mechanism of Caroline's authority over his time. He has no power to refuse. When Caroline commands his presence, he must be present. When she assigns work, he must complete it. His exhaustion is irrelevant. His preferences are meaningless. The physical toll accumulates rapidly. Samuel begins each day before dawn, assisting with household management. He works through afternoons that blur into evenings that extend past midnight. Sleep becomes something he snatches in brief intervals, never enough to truly rest. His hands shake from fatigue. His eyes burn. His thoughts move sluggishly, like wading through swamp water. But worse than the physical exhaustion is the emotional tension. Because Caroline's attention isn't purely professional. She sits too close when reviewing his work. She touches his arm to emphasize points. She makes comments that suggest appreciation beyond his utility as a worker. "You're quite remarkable, Samuel," she says one evening, her voice softer than usual. "My father always said educated slaves were too troublesome, but I find intelligence rather valuable." The pause before valuable carries implications Samuel pretends not to notice. He keeps his eyes on the manifest he's copying, his expression carefully neutral. "Just trying to serve well, Miss Caroline." "Oh, I think you're doing far more than that." Her tone suggests layers he refuses to unpack. I think you understand that this household runs more smoothly because of your contributions. I want you to know I appreciate that. Specifically. Samuel says nothing. Silence is the only safe response when white women make statements that blur the lines between professional relationship and something far more dangerous. But Caroline notices his silence, and something in her expression shifts, a flash of irritation that she's not receiving the response she wants. Her next words come sharper. My sister has been monopolizing your time lately. That needs to stop. Your primary obligation is to me. I purchased you. I determine how you're utilized. Is that understood? Yes, Miss Caroline. The words taste like ash, but they're necessary. This is Caroline staking her claim, asserting property rights, reminding everyone, including herself, of the fundamental power dynamic that governs every interaction. The silent war between the sisters intensifies. Catherine finds Samuel in the morning hours, pulling him into brief conversations in hallways, passing him notes requesting his presence for invented tasks. Caroline counters by assigning work that extends later into each night, by scheduling Samuel's days so completely that no gaps exist for Catherine to exploit. Samuel becomes the rope in their tug-of-war, stretched between two forces that will eventually tear him apart. He sees Isaac watching him with concerned eyes. He hears old Dinah's whispered warning, "Boy, you're walking toward a cliff. Step back before they push you off." But stepping back isn't an option. He can't refuse either sister without consequences. He can't escape the plantation. He can't even speak honestly about his situation to anyone who might help, because there is no help available. The entire system is designed to keep him exactly where he is. Powerless, controlled, property. And then Virgil Henley notices. Henley is many things. Cruel, calculating, committed to the plantation system, but he's not stupid. He sees Samuel's exhaustion. He sees both Yancey sisters suddenly intensely focused on the same enslaved worker. He sees the changed dynamics in the main house, the tension radiating from interactions that should be mundane. Henley has managed enslaved labor for 20 years. He knows the signs of disruption, the patterns that precede rebellion or escape attempts, or the kind of conflict between white people that spills over into violence against those with no power to protect themselves. So he begins his own investigation. He questions the house staff casually. Has Samuel been neglecting duties? Has he been seen anywhere he shouldn't be? He positions himself to observe the main house at unusual hours, watching comings and goings. He makes excuses to speak with Caroline about plantation business, assessing her mood and focus. And he concludes that something is very wrong. The Yancey twins are competing over their property in ways that threaten plantation stability. And Virgil Henley, who has built his career on maintaining order through ruthless efficiency, sees both a problem that needs solving and an opportunity to consolidate his own power. One evening, as Samuel finally stumbles toward the quarters well past midnight, Henley steps from the shadows near the main house. His presence is sudden and threatening, blocking Samuel's path. "You're working late these days," Henley observes, his voice carrying that flat tone that Samuel has learned means danger. "Both sisters keeping you busy, are they?" "Just doing my assigned work, sir." Samuel keeps his eyes down, his body language submissive. Assigned work. Henley chuckles without humor. "That what we're calling it now. Boy, I've been running plantations since before you were born. I know trouble when I see it. And you are trouble." He steps closer, close enough that Samuel can smell tobacco and whiskey on his breath. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me exactly what's going on between you and those women. Every detail. Or I'm going to assume the worst and act accordingly. And you know what accordingly means for a slave who gets too familiar with white ladies. Samuel's blood runs cold. Because Henley has just made explicit the threat that has been hovering over every interaction since Catherine first spoke to him in the library. One accusation from Henley, one suggestion that Samuel has been inappropriate with either sister, and Samuel will hang. No trial. No questions. Just a rope and a tree, and a lesson for every other enslaved person about maintaining proper distance. "There's nothing to tell, sir," Samuel says carefully. "I work for Miss Caroline. Miss Catherine sometimes requests assistance with household tasks. That's all." Henley's eyes narrow. "That's all. Right." He spits tobacco juice into the dirt near Samuel's feet. "I'll be watching you, boy. Every moment. And when you slip, and you will slip, I'll be there. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Henley walks away, his boots crunching on the gravel path. Samuel stands frozen for a long moment, his exhaustion forgotten in the face of this new, explicit threat. He is trapped in an impossible situation that's collapsing toward violence. The sisters are fighting over him. Henley is investigating him. Every direction leads toward destruction. And Samuel, standing alone in the Alabama darkness, understands with terrible clarity that he will not survive this. The question is no longer if he will die, but when, and how much suffering will precede that death. Inside the main house, a lamp still burns in Caroline's office window. In her bedroom above, Catherine paces, unable to sleep, composing in her mind the conversation she'll have with Samuel tomorrow. And in his cottage, Henley cleans his pistol and plans his next move, certain that maintaining order will require making an example of someone. The machinery of tragedy is fully engaged now, each gear turning toward the inevitable catastrophe. 3 people have set events in motion that will end with 17 dead and a plantation burning. But they don't know that yet. They're still convinced they can control the outcome, can manage the situation, can somehow navigate through danger to safety. They're wrong. The office is cooler than the rest of the house, something about the thick walls and northern exposure that keeps the worst of the Alabama heat at bay. But Samuel feels no relief from the temperature as he stands before Caroline's desk, summoned by a house girl who delivered the message with frightened eyes. Caroline doesn't look up immediately. She continues writing in her ledger, each stroke of her quill deliberate and measured. Samuel has learned that this delay is intentional, a power play that reminds him of his place, that she controls even the basic dignity of acknowledgement. Finally, she sets down the quill and looks at him. Her green eyes hold something new tonight, not anger, but calculation with an edge of something almost like hurt. "Close the door," she says. Samuel's stomach drops. A closed door means privacy, which means danger. But he has no choice. He closes the door and returns to stand before the desk, hands clasped, eyes downward, every line of his body language communicating submission. Caroline opens her desk drawer and removes a small object. She places it on the polished wood surface between them. A hairpin. Delicate, decorated with tiny pearls, the kind Catherine wears in her elaborate hairstyles. "I found this in the garden house 3 days ago," Caroline says, her voice eerily calm. "Curious, since we don't store anything requiring my sister's presence there. Then I began paying attention, noting when you disappeared during afternoon hours, observing when Catherine claimed sudden need for fresh air or garden inspections." She pauses, letting the implications settle like sediment in still water. "Rose mentioned seeing you and my sister in the library. Door closed. Heads bent together over books. And yesterday, Mr. Cutler from the neighboring estate commented that he'd seen Catherine riding alone to the far edge of our property, and later observed you walking in the same direction." Samuel keeps his expression neutral, but his mind races. The evidence is circumstantial but damning. In a world where appearance matters more than truth, these observations are enough to construct whatever narrative Caroline chooses. I want you to understand something, Caroline continues, standing now and walking around the desk. She positions herself close, not touching, but violating the careful distance that usually exists between them. I'm not a fool. And I'm not a romantic like my sister. I see situations clearly and respond accordingly. She picks up the hairpin, turns it between her fingers so the pearls catch lamplight. Catherine believes she's in love with you. She thinks your conversations about French novels and philosophy represent some genuine connection that transcends the rather obvious reality of your situation. Caroline's tone holds contempt. Not for Samuel, but for her sister's delusions. She doesn't understand that what she's doing is dangerous for everyone. Her reputation, the plantation's stability, and most urgently, your continued existence. Samuel risks speaking. Miss Caroline, I never encouraged. Don't. She cuts him off sharply. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you have agency in this. My sister sought you out. You responded because refusing a white woman's attention would have consequences. You're not the villain here, Samuel. You're the prize in a game you didn't choose to play. The accuracy of this assessment, the way Caroline sees through all pretense to the ugly mechanics beneath, makes Samuel's chest tighten. She understands exactly what he is, property being fought over by two owners. Caroline returns to her desk, but doesn't sit. She leans against it, arms crossed, studying him with the same intensity she applies to ledger columns that don't balance. Here's what I'm offering you, she says. A transaction, since that's the only honest framework for our relationship. You transfer your attentions exclusively to me. You end whatever you have with Catherine, gently, carefully, in ways that don't enrage her or create scandal. You become, for all practical purposes, mine alone. The possessive pronoun lands like a blow. Samuel forces himself to breathe steadily. In exchange, Caroline continues, I protect you. From Catherine's recklessness, from Henley's suspicions, from the consequences of this impossible situation. I ensure you remain here, in the house, doing work that doesn't break your body. I guarantee your safety insofar as I have power to guarantee anything. She lets this offer hang in the air for a moment before delivering the alternative. If you refuse, I sell you. Not to another plantation in Alabama where Catherine might find you, but deep south. Louisiana sugar fields, where the life expectancy for workers is measured in years rather than decades. You'll be gone within a week, and my sister will eventually recover from her infatuation. Samuel understands he's watching Caroline perform a kind of moral surgery on herself, cutting away sentiment, exposing the brutal logic beneath. She's not being cruel for cruelty's sake. She's being honest about the only power dynamics that actually exist. You're asking me to choose my owner, Samuel says quietly. I'm offering you the illusion of choice, Caroline corrects. Which is more than most in your position receive. I could simply sell you tomorrow without explanation. I could tell Henley my suspicions and let nature take its course. Instead, I'm negotiating, giving you some small voice in determining your future. The terrible thing is that Caroline genuinely believes she's being merciful. She's offering protection, security, even a form of partnership within the grotesque constraints of their situation. She thinks this proposition represents enlightened self-interest rather than the violation it actually is. Samuel looks at her, really looks at her for the first time since entering the office. He sees a woman who has learned to survive in a world that denies women power by becoming ruthlessly pragmatic, by mastering the system's rules rather than challenging them. She's not evil in any simple sense. She's adapted to evil so completely that she can no longer recognize it. What exactly would transferring my attentions mean? Samuel asks, though he already knows the answer. Caroline's expression doesn't change. It means you spend your evenings here, working at my side. It means when I require your presence, you come immediately. It means you accord me the respect and attention that should belong to your primary owner. The specifics will evolve as circumstances require. The euphemisms are paper-thin. Caroline is proposing that Samuel become effectively hers, not just as property, but as something more intimate. She's competing with her sister by claiming him more completely, using her authority to demand what Catherine has been seeking through affection. And Samuel has no power to refuse because the alternative is death by slower means in Louisiana cane fields. I need time to think, he tries. You have until tomorrow evening, Caroline responds. After that, I make decisions that serve my interests regardless of your preferences. This offer represents consideration I'm extending once. Don't mistake it for weakness. She returns to her desk, picks up her quill, and begins writing as if Samuel has already ceased to exist as a presence requiring acknowledgement. You're dismissed. Samuel walks from the office on legs that feel disconnected from his body. The hallway stretches before him, lamplight casting shadows that seem to reach for him with dark fingers. He passes Rose in the corridor, sees recognition and pity in her eyes, and continues toward the quarters. Outside, the night air is thick with moisture and the promise of rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbles. Samuel stands in the darkness between the main house and the quarters, belonging fully to neither world, and understands with crushing finality that he is not a man in any meaningful sense. He is a prize, an object of competition, a possession whose only value is determined by his owner's desires. The rain begins, fat drops that quickly become a downpour, soaking his clothes, running down his face like tears he's too exhausted to shed. And Samuel stands in the storm, letting it wash over him, wishing it could somehow cleanse him of the impossible choice he must make by tomorrow evening. Inside the main house, Caroline returns to her ledger, recording the day's transactions with the same careful precision she applies to all business matters. In the entry for Samuel, she writes a single word in the margin, resolved. But nothing is resolved. The machinery of tragedy continues its inexorable turning, and Caroline's attempt at control has only accelerated the collapse. Samuel hasn't slept in 3 days, not really. He manages brief intervals of unconsciousness that leave him more exhausted than rest, his mind cycling through impossible calculations that never produce acceptable answers. Caroline's ultimatum sits in his chest like swallowed stones. Choose her exclusively, or be sold to Louisiana. But choosing Caroline means betraying Catherine, which will either break her or enrage her, both of which create their own dangers. And refusing to choose means certain death in sugar fields where human life is measured in harvests rather than years. So Samuel attempts the only strategy available to powerless people. He tries to play both sides, giving each sister enough to keep them satisfied while avoiding the complete commitment either demands. It's a doomed strategy. He knows this even as he executes it. But drowning people grasp at anything, even debris that cannot possibly support their weight. He spends his evenings with Caroline as commanded, copying documents and reviewing accounts, enduring her increasing intimacy, touches that linger, conversations that blur professional boundaries, looks that suggest ownership beyond the legal definition. He performs gratitude he doesn't feel, demonstrates loyalty that's coerced rather than genuine. Then he steals moments with Catherine during daylight hours, meeting her in the garden house for conversations that have taken on a desperate quality. Catherine speaks in urgent whispers about freedom and escape, about a life beyond Alabama where their feelings can exist without danger. Samuel nods and agrees because disagreement would shatter her fantasy, and shattered fantasies make people unpredictable. But the performance is fracturing him. Isaac sees it first. They're carrying water from the well one afternoon when Isaac stops, sets down his bucket, and looks at Samuel with concern that transcends the usual caution enslaved people maintain even with each other. "You're breaking," Isaac says quietly. "I can see it happening. Whatever those women are doing to you, it's killing you faster than field work ever could." Samuel wants to deny this, but the truth is too obvious. His hands shake constantly now. He's lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. His thoughts scatter like startled birds, unable to settle on anything concrete. The mask he's maintained his entire life, the performance of submission that keeps enslaved people alive, is cracking, revealing the desperate terror beneath. "I don't know what to do," Samuel admits, and the confession feels like defeat. Every choice leads to worse outcomes. "I'm trapped in a situation that has no solution." Isaac glances around to ensure they're alone, then speaks with the blunt honesty of someone who has already survived too much to maintain comforting illusions. "There's always one solution, brother. The solution our people have used since they first brought us here in chains. You can choose when and how it ends. Take that power back, at least." Samuel understands what Isaac is suggesting. Escape through the only door that cannot be locked. Death by one's own hand rather than waiting for the system to destroy you. It's a choice enslaved people make when suffering exceeds the human capacity to endure, when even the hope of eventual freedom cannot sustain life through present horror. "I'm not ready for that," Samuel whispers. "None of us are," Isaac replies. "Until suddenly we are." Old Dinah delivers her warning more directly. She corners Samuel in the kitchen house, her gnarled hands gripping his arm with surprising strength. "Boy, you listen to me. I've lived 63 years on this earth, 58 of them enslaved. I've seen this exact situation play out before, white women fighting over colored men. It always ends with the man dead and the women moving on with their lives. You need to do something drastic right now, or you won't see summer." "What can I do?" Samuel's voice breaks. "I have no power, no options, nowhere to run." "Then make noise," Dinah hisses. "Break something publicly. Get yourself sold before they kill you. A whipping and a sale is better than what's coming if you stay here." But Samuel can't bring himself to sabotage his own situation deliberately. Some combination of hope and pride and exhaustion keeps him locked in place, continuing the doomed strategy of trying to satisfy both sisters. Meanwhile, Catherine's affection has transformed into something darker and more consuming. She no longer speaks of freedom as an abstract concept. Now she whispers specific plans. "I have jewelry we can sell," she tells Samuel during a stolen moment in the garden house, her eyes bright with fervor that looks disturbingly like madness. "Enough to buy passage north. We'll go to Pennsylvania. I know Quaker families there who oppose slavery. They'll help us. We'll be married, properly married, and you'll be free." Samuel tries to inject reality into her fantasy. "Miss Catherine, they'll chase us. The whole county will mobilize. Slave catchers, dogs, armed men. We won't make it 50 miles. We will if we're clever. We'll travel at night, avoid main roads. I've been studying maps. There are routes through the wilderness." "There are no routes that work," Samuel interrupts, risking her anger to speak truth. "You're a white woman. You can't disappear. And I'm a literate black man, which makes me memorable. Every sheriff, every patrol, every person we encounter will be looking for exactly us." But Catherine doesn't want to hear this. She's constructed a narrative where love conquers all obstacles, where determination and careful planning can overcome the entire machinery of the slave system. She's living in a French novel rather than antebellum Alabama. "You don't believe we can do it," she says, and her voice holds accusation. "You don't trust me." "I trust that you believe in this plan," Samuel responds carefully. "But belief doesn't change reality. If we run, when they catch us, and they will catch us, I'll die. Probably tortured first as an example. And you'll be ruined, your reputation destroyed. Is that what you want?" Catherine's face flushes with anger and hurt. "What I want is for you to fight for us instead of accepting defeat. What I want is for you to believe our feelings matter more than their rules." And Samuel realizes that Catherine fundamentally cannot grasp the different stakes they face. Her worst-case scenario is social ruin. His is death by lynching. These are not equivalent consequences, but Catherine has convinced herself they are because admitting otherwise would require acknowledging the unbridgeable power differential between them. Their argument is interrupted by footsteps outside the garden house. Both freeze, terror spiking through the charged atmosphere. But the footsteps pass, just someone walking by, unaware of the dangerous conversation happening within. The near discovery shakes Catherine visibly. When she speaks again, her voice trembles. "We're doing this," she says with desperate determination. "Friday night. I'll have everything prepared. Meet me here at midnight. We leave together, or not at all." Before Samuel can respond, she's gone, slipping out of the garden house and hurrying toward the main building, leaving Samuel alone with the crushing weight of her ultimatum. Outside, concealed behind the rose trellis, Rose has heard everything. Rose, who has worked in the Yanzi house for 8 years. Rose, who has a husband in the quarters and 3 children she loves more than her own life. Rose, who understands that if Catherine and Samuel run, the resulting chaos will destroy everyone. The plantation will be investigated, workers will be sold to settle resulting debts, families will be torn apart. Rose faces an impossible choice of her own. She can say nothing, let Catherine's doomed plan proceed, and watch the catastrophe unfold. Or she can tell someone, Caroline or worse, Henley, and perhaps prevent the escape but certainly condemn Samuel to immediate punishment. Either choice leads to horror. Either choice requires betraying someone. This is what slavery does. It creates situations where there are no good options, where every decision produces casualties, where even trying to protect your own family means participating in someone else's destruction. Rose walks back toward the main house, her heart pounding, her mind cycling through scenarios that all end badly. She thinks of her children, especially her youngest, just 5 years old, who still believes the world can be kind. She thinks of Samuel, who never wanted any of this, who is being ground between forces he cannot control. She thinks of Catherine, blinded by romantic fantasy to the death she's orchestrating. And Rose understands that whatever choice she makes in the next few hours will haunt her for the rest of her life. There is no innocent option. There is only choosing which tragedy to enable, which people to save and which to sacrifice. In the quarters that evening, Samuel sits outside his cabin, staring at nothing. Isaac sits beside him in silence, the companionship of shared hopelessness, the only comfort available to people with no power to change their circumstances. Inside the main house, Catherine writes in her journal, planning an escape that has no chance of success. In her office, Caroline reviews accounts, unaware that her careful control is about to explode into chaos. And Rose stands in the hallway between the kitchen and the main house, frozen with indecision, holding information that will determine who lives and who dies when Friday night arrives. The thunder that's been promising rain for days finally breaks. The storm arrives with violence, wind that tears at trees, lightning that illuminates the plantation in stark flashes, rain that falls in sheets. The storm outside mirrors the storm building inside these walls. And like all storms, this one will leave destruction in its wake. Rose doesn't sleep Thursday night. She lies beside her husband in their cabin, listening to his steady breathing and the softer sounds of their children in the corner. 3 small bodies curled together on their shared pallet, innocent in sleep. She watches them until dawn light filters through the gaps in the wooden walls, and still she hasn't decided. But morning brings clarity through fear. Her youngest daughter coughs, just a small sound, probably nothing serious, but it reminds Rose of how fragile everything is. How quickly children can be taken, sold away, lost forever to parents who have no legal right to keep them. If Catherine runs with Samuel, the plantation will explode. There will be investigations, accusations, chaos. And in that chaos, enslaved families always suffer. Children get sold to settle debts. Husbands and wives are separated to punish the community for individual transgressions. The innocent bear consequences for crimes they didn't commit. Rose makes her choice while watching her daughter sleep. She will protect her children, whatever the cost to her soul. She finds Virgil Henley in the stable yard that afternoon, supervising repairs to a wagon wheel. Her approach is careful, differential. A house worker seeking the overseer's attention is always a dangerous thing, always requires perfect performance of submissiveness. "Mr. Henley, sir? Might I speak with you privately? It's urgent." Henley looks up from the wagon, his pale eyes assessing her with that cold calculation she's learned to fear. But he gestures for her to follow him away from the other workers, into the shadowed space between the stable and the feed barn. "This better be important," he says. "I don't have time for house drama." Rose's voice shakes as she speaks, not from performance but genuine terror at what she's about to do. "Sir, it's about Miss Catherine and Samuel. They're planning to run away together. Tomorrow night. Midnight. The Garden House." She watches Henley's expression transform from annoyance to sharp interest to something darker, a predatory focus that makes her stomach turn. She's just set events in motion that cannot be stopped. "Tell me everything," Henley commands. "Every word you heard." Rose recounts the conversation from the garden house, Catherine's plans for escape, the route north, the Quaker families in Pennsylvania, Samuel's objections, Catherine's insistence. With each detail, Henley's expression grows colder and more determined. When Rose finishes, Henley is quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly working through implications and opportunities. Finally, he speaks, and his words confirm Rose's worst fears. "You did the right thing coming to me." This kind of situation, slave getting ideas above his station, white woman losing her mind, it needs to be handled decisively. An example needs to be made. "Sir, I just thought maybe you could stop them. Prevent Miss Catherine from doing something foolish." "Oh, I'll stop them," Henley interrupts, his voice holding something that sounds almost like satisfaction. "But not quietly. This is an opportunity to send a message that resonates through every plantation in Dallas County. These situations have been too common lately, slaves getting uppity, thinking education makes them equal. It ends tomorrow night." Rose feels ice spread through her chest. She'd hoped Henley would simply prevent the escape, perhaps arrange for Samuel to be sold away quickly before anyone got hurt. But she's hearing something else in his tone, the promise of violence, of public demonstration, of consequences that extend far beyond stopping an escape attempt. "Mr. Henley, sir, I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted to protect the plantation, protect my family." "And you have," Henley says, his expression suggesting dismissal. "You've done your duty. Now let me do mine. Go back to the house. Say nothing to anyone. Forget this conversation happened." Rose walks away on shaking legs, understanding with sickening certainty that she's just condemned Samuel to death. Not a quick sail to Louisiana, not a whipping and reassignment, death. The kind of death that serves as warning and entertainment, that draws crowds and leaves bodies hanging as reminders. She wants to take it back, to somehow undo what she's revealed. But information, once released, cannot be recalled. The machinery is already turning. Henley wastes no time. That afternoon, he rides to 3 neighboring plantations, visiting overseers he's worked with before, hard men who share his philosophy about maintaining order through fear and force. He tells them about a slave planning to run off with a white woman, about an opportunity to make an example that will keep their own workers properly terrified and compliant. The men he recruits are eager. This kind of work, the ritualized violence that maintains the slave system, gives them purpose and power. They are the enforcers of a social order built on brutality, and they take pride in their role. By Friday evening, Henley has assembled 6 men, all armed with pistols and rifles. They meet at the edge of the Yancey property as darkness falls, discussing their plan with the casual efficiency of people who have done this kind of work before. "We let them meet," Henley explains, his voice low in the gathering dusk. "Let the slave arrive, let Miss Catherine show herself. Then we go in fast. The story is simple. He attacked her, we rescued her, justice was served. Miss Catherine will be upset initially, but she'll understand the necessity once the shock passes. Women always do." One of the men, Cutler from the adjacent plantation, asks the obvious question: what if Miss Catherine doesn't go along with the story? What if she insists they were running off together? Henley's smile is cold in the fading light. "Then we protect her from her own testimony. We explain she's traumatized, confused, not in her right mind. No one believes a hysterical woman over 6 armed men who witnessed an assault. The story stays clean." They position themselves around the garden house as full darkness settles over the plantation. The structure sits perhaps 50 yards from the main house, close enough that lamplight from windows provides faint illumination, but far enough that conversations inside can't be overheard. Henley and his men find concealment in the surrounding landscaping, behind the rose trellis, in the shadow of the tool shed, beneath the spreading branches of a magnolia that smells sickly sweet in the night air. They settle in to wait, weapons ready, certain of their righteousness. The night is humid and moonless, thick with the promise of rain that's been threatening for days. Insects sing their urgent songs. Somewhere distant, a dog barks and falls silent. The plantation holds its breath. In the main house, Caroline works late in her office, unaware that her careful control is about to shatter. She's been reviewing Samuel's decision. He gave her his answer that morning, a quiet acceptance of her terms that felt more like defeat than agreement. She's won the competition with her sister, she tells herself, though the victory tastes strangely bitter. In her bedroom, Catherine prepares for escape. She's packed a small bag with jewelry and practical clothes, written a letter explaining her actions that she'll leave on her pillow. Her hands shake with excitement and fear as she checks the items methodically. Money, map, supplies. She's convinced herself this will work, that love and determination can overcome impossible odds. And in the quarters, Samuel sits outside his cabin, watching the stars appear one by one through breaks in the cloud cover. Isaac sits beside him, neither man speaking, both understanding this may be their last conversation. "You don't have to go," Isaac says finally. "You could just not show up. Let her wait and eventually give up." "She won't give up," Samuel replies. "She'll come looking for me. Make a scene. It'll end the same way, just messier. Then you're walking into your own death." "I've been walking toward it since the day I was born into this system," Samuel says quietly. "At least this way, I choose the moment. At least this way, I tried something other than submission. The plantation clock tower, a pretentious addition Cornelius Yancey installed a decade ago, chimes 11. 1 hour until midnight. 1 hour until the garden house becomes a killing ground. Henley and his men settle deeper into their positions, fingers on triggers, eyes adjusted to the darkness, waiting for their prey to arrive. And Rose, watching from a window of the main house, whispers prayers she doesn't really believe anyone is listening to, begging forgiveness for a choice that offered only different flavors of damnation. The night deepens. The stars wheel overhead, indifferent to human suffering. And the garden house sits silent and waiting, its door unlocked, its interior dark, a trap baited with hope and about to spring shut with violence. Samuel walks toward the garden house through darkness so complete it feels like moving through liquid shadow. The clouds have thickened, blocking even starlight, turning the plantation into a landscape of shapes and suggestions rather than concrete forms. His heart hammers against his ribs, fear and resignation mix together into something that feels almost like calm. He knows this is probably suicide. Knows that even if Catherine's plan somehow worked initially, they'd be hunted down within days. But the alternative, continuing to exist as a prize fought over by two sisters, ground down between competing claims of ownership, that's a slower death. At least this way, he's making a choice, however doomed. The garden house materializes from the darkness, its windows reflecting faint light from the distant main building. The door stands slightly ajar, Catherine's signal that she's already inside, waiting for him. Samuel pauses at the threshold, his hand on the rough wood. Some instinct screams danger, warns him to turn back. But there's nowhere to go back to. Every direction leads to destruction. At least this path leads toward something chosen rather than imposed. He pushes the door open and steps inside. Catherine stands in the center of the small room, illuminated by a single lantern that casts golden light across her face. She's dressed practically for once, a simple dark dress instead of her usual elaborate gowns, her hair pulled back severely. She looks younger somehow, more vulnerable, stripped of the armor of wealth and status. "You came," she breathes, and her relief is palpable. "I was afraid you wouldn't come." "I came," Samuel confirms. Then, because honesty feels important in what may be his final moments, "But Miss Catherine, you need to understand, this won't work. We won't make it. This ends badly no matter what happens next." Catherine crosses to him, close enough that he can smell her perfume, lavender and something else, something expensive his enslaved nose has learned to identify as the scent of privilege. Her eyes hold his with desperate intensity. "Then let it end badly together. Let us at least try. I can't keep living in this prison of expectations and lies. I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel for you." Before Samuel can respond, before Catherine can say anything more, the garden house door crashes open with explosive force. Virgil Henley stands in the entrance, pistol drawn, 6 other men behind him carrying rifles and torches. The sudden light is blinding after the darkness, turning the small room into a stage set for violence. "Step away from her," Henley orders, his voice cold and final. "Step away right now, or I'll shoot you where you stand." Time seems to slow. Samuel sees everything with terrible clarity, the guns pointed at his chest, the triumph in Henley's eyes, Catherine's face transforming from hope to horror. He sees his death written in this tableau, inevitable as sunrise. He raises his hands slowly, stepping back from Catherine. Survival instinct takes over even though survival seems impossible. "I'm not armed," he says quietly. "I'm not threatening anyone." "Not what it looks like to us," Cutler says from behind Henley. "Looks like a slave alone with a white woman in the dark. Looks like assault in progress." Catherine finds her voice, high and desperate. No, you're wrong. I asked him to come here. This isn't what you think. Miss Catherine, Henley interrupts, his tone taking on false gentleness that makes Samuel's skin crawl. You're confused. Traumatized. We understand. This animal has manipulated you, taken advantage of your kindness. But we're here now. You're safe. Just step aside and let us handle this. Samuel watches Catherine's face as she processes what Henley is offering, a lie that saves her reputation, a narrative that transforms her choices into victimhood, an escape from consequences that preserves her social position. For a moment, he thinks she'll take it. Thinks she'll accept the easier story, the one that doesn't require her to sacrifice everything she's ever known. And he can't even be angry about it because he understands the impossible weight of what Henley is asking her to reject. But Catherine surprises them all. No, she says, and her voice carries steel Samuel has never heard before. You're not listening. I invited Samuel here. I asked him to run away with me. I love him. The words fall into the lantern-lit garden house like grenades. The men shift uncomfortably, exchanging glances that suggest they've never encountered a white woman who refuses the protection of the accepted narrative. Miss Catherine, Henley tries again, his patience clearly wearing thin. You don't know what you're saying. The shock. I know exactly what I'm saying, Catherine interrupts, stepping forward to position herself between Samuel and the guns. I love him. I have loved him for weeks. Everything we've done together has been my choice, my initiation. If you're going to punish someone, punish me. Her defiance is brave and utterly futile. Samuel sees the men's expressions harden, sees Henley's face transform from false concern to genuine anger. Catherine has just made herself dangerous, a white woman who refuses to be rescued, who insists on claiming agency in her own story, who threatens the entire structure of lies that the slave system requires. Catherine, stop, Samuel says urgently. You don't understand what you're doing. Just tell them what they want to hear. Please. But Catherine ignores him, her eyes locked on Henley with the fervor of someone who has finally found something worth fighting for, even if the fight is doomed from the start. This man has shown me more respect, more genuine conversation, more humanity than any of the so-called gentlemen who have courted me. If your laws say I cannot love him, then your laws are evil and I reject them. The declaration hangs in the heavy air. For a moment, no one moves. Then Cutler speaks, his voice holding dark amusement. Well, this just got a lot more complicated. Can't have a white woman going around saying slaves are her equals. That's the kind of talk that starts rebellions. Henley's hand tightens on his pistol. Miss Catherine, you're going to go back to the main house right now. You're going to forget this foolishness. And we're going to deal with this situation appropriately. No, Catherine's voice doesn't waver. If you touch him, you'll have to go through me. I won't let you hurt him. She wraps her arms around Samuel, holding him in full view of everyone present, a gesture of defiance that violates every social code, that marks her as irrevocably compromised in the eyes of these men. And Samuel, feeling her trembling against him, understands with crushing certainty that Catherine's love, real or imagined, genuine or delusional, has just signed both their death warrants. Because a white woman who refuses to be rescued from a black man is more dangerous to the slave system than any armed rebellion. She's challenging the fundamental narrative that justifies everything. Henley gestures to two of his men. Take Miss Catherine to the house. Restrain her if necessary. We'll deal with her after we've handled this situation. The men move forward. Catherine screams, struggles, but they're stronger. They pull her away from Samuel, her fingers grasping at his shirt, her voice rising in desperate protest. "No. Let me go. Don't hurt him. Please, I'm begging you." Her pleas fade as they drag her from the garden house, leaving Samuel alone with Henley and 4 armed men who no longer need to pretend any mercy. Henley steps forward, his expression empty of everything except cold determination. "Boy, you should have stayed invisible. Should have known your place. Now you're going to serve as a reminder to every other slave in this county about what happens when they forget what they are." Samuel doesn't beg, doesn't plead. He stands straight, meeting Henley's eyes with what dignity remains to him. If he's going to die, he'll die as a man rather than property. "I know what I am," Samuel says quietly. "The question is whether you know what you are. Whether any of you recognize the evil you're serving." Henley's smile is colder than winter. "Take him to the oak tree." And as rough hands grab Samuel's arms, as he's dragged from the garden house into the humid Alabama night, as the lantern light fades behind him, Samuel's last thought is not of fear or regret. It's of Catherine's voice, declaring her love to armed men who cannot allow such love to exist. It's of the moment when someone finally told the truth, even though truth could not save them. It's of the crack in the system's facade, small and ultimately futile, but real. And somehow, in his final moments, that crack means something.